Do you have specific retirement goals, or does the idea of making a list of goals make you a little bit uneasy? You've probably heard that you can't accomplish anything unless you make a goal to accomplish it. And one of the biggest milestones in your life might be when you can stop working for pay. But I'd like to challenge the traditional view of goal setting and say that it might be okay if you don't have a laundry list of ideas on what you're going to do with your time in retirement. And this has a profound impact on how you design your life and the direction you head for retirement. So if we think about your first 20 years in retirement, those might be the most active years when you're able to do the most. Those could consist of 7,300 days or more than that if you have good health. And so the question is, what will you do with that time? Now, we certainly want to have some ideas so that you hit the ground running and you're not just retiring from work. But if you think about the things that you enjoy most, like maybe that's sitting on the beach and reading a book, is that something that you really want to do that many times? Or perhaps do we want to make sure that you have the resources to have some options and perhaps go through different chapters in retirement? Not knowing exactly what you'll do with every day is okay because it can cause you to delay your planning if you work too hard on figuring out exactly what you're going to do with your time. So if we just make some intelligent guesses about how you're going to spend your time, think about taxes and inflation and healthcare costs and factor all of that in. For most clients, I think that's a decent way to get started on your retirement planning. This line of thinking is backed by the so-called end of history illusion, and that explains just how bad we are at predicting who our future selves will be. So predicting the future is always hard. We know that as investors. But it's also hard to predict what our personality traits and our values and our preferences might look like, let's say 10 years ahead of time. If those things change, then the way you want to spend your time and your resources could very well also change. So one way to think about this is to look back 10 years and say, what was most important to you at that time? What did you like? What types of music, food, people to hang out with, all of those sorts of things. And has that changed over the last 10 years? And it might have changed for a variety of reasons, but the fact is that it probably did change in ways that you couldn't have anticipated 10 years ago, and that could very well continue. Now, it is true, and this is based on the research, that the older we get, the less those changes might be. They might be less severe. But the fact is we are likely to still experience some changes. In fact, as you get into a retirement or a financial independence stage of life, you can experience a lot of change. You might not have financial struggles, which gives you a different perspective on life. You might have kids that are out of the house. If you had kids or grandkids entering the picture, that sort of thing can certainly change your view of the world. So a lot of change can still happen later in life, and sometimes to a surprising degree. A major consequence of the end of history illusion is that we tend to double down on our current version of ourselves. So that can be good if you're very clear on what you like, but again, it's hard to predict. And so you might end up sending yourself down a path or pigeonholing certain aspects of your life. You might miss out on other rich experiences in life that you currently aren't really even aware of. So a cliche for retirement is that you're going to play golf every day or something like that. And of course, 7,300 days in your first 20 years, that could potentially get old, and that applies to pretty much anything else. I don't play golf, but whatever it is you might enjoy doing today, let's think about how you might possibly evolve. And plus, our bodies might change in ways that we aren't doing the exact same things in the future. So I want to encourage you to explore the possibility of having some loosely held retirement goals, or possibly no retirement goals at all, not very specific. Of course, we want you to be financially independent, and that probably means not working forever. So there are certainly some directions we want to head in, but as far as nailing down a list of things, maybe we can be a bit slower and gentler in terms of trying to name exactly what retirement's going to look like for us. So let's look at how some other people have talked about this problem. Carl Richards used to do the sketches on the napkins for the New York Times. He's a former financial advisor, and he talks about this a lot, and it's kind of consistent with what my experience is with clients, where you might ask people, what are your goals in retirement? What do you want to do? And sometimes they just don't really know. They know that they don't want to work forever. They have a decent idea of what level of income might make them comfortable, but they're not really sure how to answer the question. And Carl would point out that at that point, sometimes people just say what they think they should say. So they say, I want to be free to do whatever I want when I want. Or they might say, I want to travel. I mean, that's what people want to do in retirement, right? Or they might say they want to spend time with loved ones. And there's nothing wrong with any of those goals. Those are all great. But we want to be specific about what exactly they mean. So what is travel? What does it mean to spend time with loved ones, and why couldn't that happen right now? What are the specific differences that would make it a reality? And once you start doing that, it can feel like you're starting to force things sometimes. I've also heard Carl refer to Pema Chodron's excellent book, When Things Fall Apart, multiple times. And the gist of that book is that the ground is constantly shifting beneath us, and it's really hard to predict with any certainty what's going to happen, and grasping for certainty can be a recipe for suffering. So if we can acknowledge that, we have some preferences and some directions to head in, but if things don't work out exactly that way, that's exactly what we should expect out of life. So that's a pretty big oversimplification, and I'm not sure the book even contains the word goals, but it's a pretty quick read, and you can check it out if you haven't seen it before. There's also a lot of information out there about not having goals and some of the benefits of that and some of the pitfalls of making goals. And you can search online for how that might apply to you, because it can be situation or person specific. But the important thing to remember is that not having goals doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It doesn't mean that you don't have any desires or that you can't make your life or the world better. It just means that you haven't written down specific goals that you're going to try to pursue. By the way, I'm Justin Pritchard, and I help people plan for retirement and invest for the future. So I'm going to have some links to some of the things we look at here today down in the description, as well as some general retirement planning information. This is more of the nuts and bolts in terms of figuring out, taxes and Social Security and spending and income and that sort of thing. There will be some good resources for that, and I think you'll find that very helpful. By the way, if you are finding this interesting, please leave a quick thumbs up. That's a signal to me to keep talking about these types of topics. I will also link to an article by Maggie Zhou, which discusses anti-goals, and this is the idea of maybe figuring out what you don't want in your life anymore instead of all of the things you do want. When it comes to retirement planning, those might be things like, I never want to drive in rush hour again, or I don't want to ever feel stressed about what medical bills I'm going to pay. I want to make it really easy to spend time with my loved ones, whether that's making it affordable or not having to go through too many airports or whatever the case may be. By eliminating the things that don't necessarily add to your life, you may be able to leave room for the things that do add to your life. However, we don't want to forget that end of history illusion. So if you are thinking, these are things I really don't want in my life, it may be the case that later in life you would tolerate them and really enjoy them. They might add to your life. So by ruling things out entirely that could potentially come back to haunt you, we just want to be careful about predicting exactly who we will be, what we want, what we prefer, what we value in the future. All that said, we probably do want to have some vision for how you're going to enjoy yourself in retirement. There are some studies to suggest that leaving work can potentially lead to some mental and physical health declines, but there's no guarantee that will happen to you. That said, there are some significant changes that happen when you stop working. So you lose the structure of going to work, the schedule. Sometimes that can be helpful. You might lose the identity of being a whatever it is you used to do for work. For some people, that's valuable. You might lose a lot of social interaction. So the time you spent talking to coworkers, colleagues, customers, etc., that can possibly cause you to have a lot less social interaction, which can be problematic. Even physical activity for office workers, even there may be a lot less just walking back and forth up and down the stairs, your walk after lunch with a coworker, that sort of thing goes away, and you risk having some physical health impact. Ultimately, you end up with fewer kind of required challenges that might keep your mind sharp as you have to overcome different challenges at work. And you also lose the accolades or the recognition that you might have grown to appreciate over the years. Maybe you value that, maybe you don't. In general, ultimately, you can lose some sense of purpose as you stop working. And for many people, I know they're going to say, my work is not my purpose, and that's great. But for some people, it has a surprising place in your psyche, so just keep that in mind. The good news is that you can offset those effects. So whether you're taking classes or volunteering or working on different projects or something else, you can really offset those mental and physical effects of stopping work. So I know of a woman who coordinates volunteers opportunities for retirees, and the way she explains it is, this helps them to get out of the house and maybe stop thinking about their health issues. These are ways to keep them engaged, and it might not even feel like work for them. They're doing things for nonprofits where they just kind of need to have a responsible adult keeping an eye on things, that type of thing. And it really is good for everybody. It's good for the community and it's good for the individual. So please make sure that whatever it is, you have a way to have that purpose in your life. And so if you want to set some goals, that's fantastic. Just hold them with a loose hand, knowing that things might evolve. And if you don't have a lot of specific goals, that could be okay. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please leave a quick thumbs up. Thank you, and take care.